Hey Minions, Jim here. March Madness is going to start in about a week, next Sunday, and with all the intense games that we've had, I thought today would be a good opportunity to talk about what I think are 5 keys to victory. Now, this is my own personal opinion and it's based heavily on my playstyle. There are many things that are important and it's hard to distill them down to a list of 5, but these are things that I found work for me time and time again. And a lot of people often ask me, what's your strategy like and how do you play the game? And today I thought I'd touch a little bit on that. And if you have your own list and you disagree with me, that's perfectly fine. I'm biased towards a certain playstyle. Your playstyle may be different. It doesn't make either of us wrong. I'm not even saying that I'm the best player in the world. How would I even quantify that? I just always aspire to be consistently competitive in any game, even Smash Up. That's my goal. I want to know that I have a chance to win every single time and that I always feel like a threat, because that's pretty much the best that we could hope for. It is a game where anything can happen. There's been times where I've lost badly. That's just how it goes, and that's good. You want a game to have that element of uncertainty where anything can happen. It's what makes playing the game meaningful. When I play the Smash Up app at home against the AI, and I can beat the AI like 90% of the time, that's not really that valuable because there's never really a chance there. But at the same time, it's what's cultivated the keys to victory, so there's lessons in there regardless. So what do I deem to be important? That's a very important question, and I want to say that by following these steps, usually a lot of which occurs before the game even begins, you can put yourself in a better position. It's not going to make you draw better. It's not going to make you shuffle better. What it does is it allows a context for using your cards more appropriately and making you think about the game before it even starts. So let's get to the list. The most important thing that I always consider, the preparation that goes in before the game even starts, is number 1, what's my plan? I don't really like to play with random factions because they're randomly chosen. I could get a bad random pairing, you can get a random awesome pairing. I'm going to be at a disadvantage. Factions provide a certain utility, whether it's power or movement, and I really like to think about what am I pairing with what and for what reason. But it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes people are going to want to play random and you just go with it. But you should always have a plan, even when you're given factions randomly and you don't have a choice. Now, not everyone is going to have every card memorized in the game. That's understandable. I always encourage people to play with a card list, and I usually, when I'm in public, will carry around a card binder that you can get on the Smash Up, on the Crank It Up Facebook page that just shows all the cards, because I feel like that's public knowledge and you should know what people are able to do, especially as we get later on in the list. But most importantly, you should know what you can do, regardless of whether or not your opponents know it. So what's your plan? By looking at the cards and seeing what can I combo together, what might work together, you stand a much better chance because you know whether or not to save cards for later or whether or not to use them now. And you'll see that many of these themes will repeat themselves over the varying bullet points. So for example, I want to talk about a game that I played. It was a 3-player game a couple of years ago, and I was randomly given Dwarven Princesses. There's nothing special about Dwarven Princesses. It's just the person really wanted to play random, and that's what I got. So what do I do with that? Well, I have to think, what do dwarves do? What do princesses do? What do they kind of do together? Dwarves are really unfortunate because they have an emphasis on treasures, and princesses have nothing to do with treasures. They were created when treasures don't even exist. And specifically, although the princesses have play on minion actions, much like the dwarves have via treasures, the dwarves specifically care about treasures, like Loot Lover, getting power for each additional treasure. So the princesses can't really help with that. But there may be some things I could do. The princesses have a special that can kick me off a base, or can kick you off a base as it's scoring. Potion of Halitosis can sort of do the same thing. So I go into the game thinking, dwarves can manipulate the treasure deck. Maybe I have a good shot at getting the discard pile. Princesses can recur some minions. and I draw a 17 card draw, maybe I want to focus on being able to repeatedly play the same treasures over and over again. And since there's a theme of kicking a minion off the base, maybe I want to keep kicking myself off the base so that I can constantly overpay with a very powerful loot lover, and I always take credit for that power even though I don't actually need it. If I'm looking at who I'm playing against, they don't have any specials, which means that if I can make sure that I have the most power on my turn, I'm going to win the base. But I don't necessarily need to have a very large amount of power as it's scoring. I can use my princess action to kick myself off. I can use Potion of Halitosis to kick myself off. And then I can keep doing it. And as it turns out, I got Potion of Halitosis very early, and that's what I did. I kicked myself off a base every single time, and I kept playing the same large minion. I kept keeping the same large minion in play over and over again, to the point where people were rushing to play on what base he was at, and they'd only play a few cards, and that's what enabled me to do the same thing over and over again. Just staging a Gold Digger on one base, and repeatedly grabbing back Potion of Halitosis. It was great. Won the game by a pretty good score, even though Dwarven Princesses, I wouldn't recommend them at all, and I don't recommend them. The point is, by thinking, all right, what cards do I want to use in what situation, I have a much better chance. Again, I can't control what I draw, but if I'm holding out for certain cards, I know what I can do, and I have a much better battle plan. So it's important to think, when you get your factions, what do you want to do with them? It's why for the Gauntlet, this year, I came up with a game plan for all the teams, and made the videos about what that game plan is. Because if the team doesn't have a solid game plan, they probably don't deserve to be in this tournament, and I should maybe think of another pairing. The next point is obviously very similar, and it's what's their plan. Just as you need to know what you want to do, you have to think about what do they want to do. Now, this typically comes out in a different format. So it's important to think, what's my best play as part of your plan? So fairies, for example, if they want to add the most power, it might be using Titania to play a Glimmer and using Glimmer's talent to buff itself up. Maybe it uses enchantment for its plus power. Maybe it uses Daisy Chain. By doing this, you get a sense of what's someone's best power output. What's their big drop? With dinosaurs, I've got King Rex and I've got Augmentation. I can get 11 power. I can get King Rex and Rampage for 14 breakpoint damage, but 7 power. Just as you do this for yourself, knowing what you want to do with your cards, you need to think about what they are going to do. But it matters a little bit differently, because you have to think about, what do you need to be afraid of? For example, do they have a mass movement card? Can they swing all their minions to one base and potentially score it without you? Do you have to worry about a card like Bulking Stew or Angry Mob, where they could just hold on to cards in their hand and dump them all at once for a large surge of power and potentially get a base without you? So you have to do it, whereas you do it from a stance of confidence on your plan, you have to know what you're afraid of. What are you watching out for? What might they telegraph? For example, Overgrowth. Overgrowth might typically be played on an empty base. You have to know that that's coming. If you see that they have minions on a base, Overgrowth isn't going to be as meaningful, because it means that the base is closer to the breakpoint. So you might think, okay, they're not likely going to play Overgrowth on that plan. So you might want to think, all right, if Overgrowth is coming and I have extra minion plays, maybe I want to save my extra minion plays so that my moderate gun can take out their big gun and Overgrowth can backfire. That's an example of trying to figure out, what are they going to do and how am I going to counter it? The third bullet point, which ties directly into the first two, specifically deals with specials. Because specials can swing bases, and when you can swing bases enough, you can swing the game. You'll often hear me talk about a term called deterministic. It basically means that if you know what you can do, it's going to happen, and there's nothing that can change it. So if you can deterministically score a base, in other words, I play this card, which will generate this much power, and the person doesn't have any specials, then I'm definitely going to win that base, because there's nothing they can do to change it at the last second. When you know that they have no specials, you can proceed with a lot of confidence, and it allows you to wait. It means that you can let them build up their power on their turn, and then just know what you can do to overtake it. It ties back into the first point with what's my big drop. If there's a 25 breakpoint base, and I know that I can do 13, I'm comfortable letting them get to 12 if I know that they can't do 13, because then I can drop my 13, I'll beat them efficiently, and then there's nothing they can do about it. In fact, it'd be very good because it means that they over-invested for their place, and I'm getting a much more efficient victory in first, which means that I can use my cards for a future base. If they do have specials, however, then I can't make that assumption. I may have to assume that they actually have the specials. This will come into play a lot with scoring solo bases. I love to score solo bases because the points that I get, if I win the base, I'm getting the same amount of points. But what I'm doing is I'm actively denying you points. I would rather throw one minion on a base and let you win the base by a landslide and solo another base than try and compete with you on two bases, lose one, and win one. The difference is that I'll use the strategic second place to allow myself to have the resources in order to win that base solo. But if they have a Shinobi, if they have a Dust Devil, if they have any form of special that can disrupt that, then I have to approach it very differently. I have to assume that they have it. I may need to come up with a different plan because that's definitely part of theirs. When I play ninjas, it's pretty much obvious. I will stay off a base entirely and happily throw a Shinobi on there for second place. And there's nothing you can do about it. Unless you can. In which case I have to think very carefully, alright, maybe if they do have a special, if they're playing tornadoes, and they can kick me off at the last second, then I need to throw on another minion to make sure that that doesn't happen. But they could also move me during their turn, in addition to the fact that they can move me with a special. So maybe I have to commit 2 minions. The point is, knowing whether or not they have a special, which should be traced back to the card list, is really important. And it allows you to figure out, alright, what do I need to do in order to win the base with confidence? If they have a special and all they can do is add plus X power, then if I beat them by that much power, then go ahead and do that, because that special won't make a difference anyway. Of course, this creates a separate problem where if you're continually overspending on a base, eventually you'll start running out of cards, and then that'll form a different problem because it means that you've won the battle, but you're ultimately going to lose the war. Which brings up the next 2 points. The first of which is, what do I need to do in order to get second place? Now, admittedly, this matters a lot in 2-player, which I'm focusing on because of March Smashness, but I also think that there's lessons of this in 3-player as well. In 4-player, anything can happen, and I'm not going to talk about that. So what do I need to do in order to get second place? You can't compete on every base. If you try, you're going to lose. But you can't afford to just give away points either. As I just mentioned, I really like scoring solo bases because you don't get any points. So the best counter to that is to ask, what do I need to do to ensure second? Do they have destruction? Do they have movement? Can they remove me in any way? What is the bare minimum that I need to do in order to make sure that no matter what they do, then I'm going to get second place? There's other advantages to this because the player knows that I'm aiming for second place. But they don't want to give me second place easily. So they may not play on that base at all. In some respects, you're actually holding the base hostage. This is actually a great way to play against zombies because zombies can get played over and over again. The best thing to actually do with them is to just leave them where they are and strand them. If you pick a zombie base as your easy second place base, then you're doing them a favor by letting them go to the discard pile where they can get their Tenacious Z's back. If you actively stop competing there, you force them to overspend so that they can get their minions back. At the same time, if those are minions that they need, they can't do anything with them. It also means that they don't want to play on that base, so now they have to play on this base, which means that they're actively splitting their focus and being forced to pivot, which means that a new base is created and they're investing there, which means I can go big and overtake them there. So not always competing can force them to compete elsewhere, And that actually creates the desirable efficiency strike where you're again winning 12 to 13. If you are trying to compete at both bases, not only do you become more inefficient, but you make them more efficient, and that's the opposite of what you want to happen. So don't try to compete on every base, but don't give it away either. If they have a special where they can kick you off at the last second, make sure you put down 2 minions. You may also need to consider, well, it's only 1 point. If I have to commit multiple minions to only get 1 point, maybe that's not the best idea. Which brings me to my final point, which is probably the most important one of all. And it's the question, is it worth it? There are many things in Smash Up that you can do. The question is, should you do them? I remember the first time I was playing Chucky's Cookie. We had talked for a while, but we had finally gotten around to playing a game, and he said, I can score this base, but I don't know if I want to. And that's when I knew that it's like, all right, it's time to kick this up a notch. Because he's exactly right. It's not necessarily worth it. You can explode your hand, get rid of all your good cards, and win a base. But that may not be the best idea. Tying back to the first couple of points. If I can drop 20 power and you have 4, I could win a 24 breakpoint base and get probably 4 points, maybe even 5. But why would I? I'm overspending significantly. Maybe I want to wait in order to get them closer so that I have to spend less. Then again, maybe I can't afford to play any games because they're also capable of doing 20, and I don't want to be the one who gets, second place. Sometimes it's not just about the points, but it's about the base ability. Maybe the base benefits the winner. Maybe it's the factory base for robots where, we could trade power, but if I get it on my turn, I'm going to get, a certain amount of points. Maybe I want to hold out for more points later on and go really big so I'm scoring 7 or 8 instead of 5 or 6 this turn. Then again, I have to compete for the rest of the game. So I need to ask, is it worth it? I'd never like overpaying for second place. As a matter of fact, I try actively to avoid it. I don't necessarily like giving you first place on your turn either, unless I'm trying to make sure that I get the base. It's not necessarily worth it to me. But you also need to ask, is it worth foregoing those points if they're going to kick you off? If knowing that you're going to spend 10 power to maybe 14 in order to guarantee that you actually get those points, maybe that is worth it. Sometimes I'll talk about how a 5 and a 4 combo really well together on a single base. But I don't necessarily know that I want to do that. You only have 2 5s and you only have 4 4s. They're pretty precious commodities, and maybe you don't have any recursion. So you have to ask, do I want to use 2 of my best cards on the same base? Do I want to use 2 of my 2 best cards, my 2 5s, on the same base? There are some really powerful combos that you can do out of nowhere, but then it sort of handicaps you for the rest of the game. It's a difficult choice that you have to make, and it's one that you typically have to make on the fly because you're looking at the cards in your hand. You see a play, but you don't necessarily know if you want to take it because you don't know what you're going to draw. You don't know how much longer the game is going to go on. In some respects, Smash Up is a 5-base game. It's very common in 2-player where I'll win bases 1 and 3, 4 to 2. You'll win bases 2 and 4, 4 to 2, and then we'll be tied. And whoever wins the 5th base, will win the game. Sometimes there are advantages to taking an early lead. If I can get the first 2 bases, I might be more inclined to spend big on the 3rd one because it means that all I have to do is play for second and I'm most likely going to win the game. So I'll play for big on the 3rd base. But am I going to play big on the 2nd? Am I going to play big on the 1st? That's a really hard call and one that honestly just comes with a lot of experience. You have to think about what are the other bases, how long is this game going to go on? Are they playing fast? Do I need to disrupt what they're going to do? Very often, I'll find that the answer is no. If something is worth it, it's probably not. There are times when the answer is yes, and it's nerve-wracking if you guess wrong, and it's like, I should have done that. Sometimes I will lose a base if it means clearing the board. I'll do this against robots, for example. I'll overpay for second place because I know that the robots can break 2 bases in one turn, potentially with Microbot Alpha being dropped as a bomb on another base. So in that case, ideally, I don't like overpaying for second place, but it is worth it because the greater risk is that I'm going to get blown out on 2 bases, and there's nothing I can do about it. Also, if I have to use up all my good cards in a must-win situation, yeah, that's probably worth it. So that's something that I want people to consider as they're trying to improve their game and trying to consistently be competitive. Just to repeat, you need to know what your plan is. What is the best thing that you can do with your cards? What are you trying to do over the course of the game? What you don't want to do is realize, I should have saved this card for later. For example, if you're playing zombies and you have a recursion card, you typically want to recur the best cards. You don't want to recur like a mediocre card just because you happen to have the recursion early. You want to know what you want to save. You'll often think about this with like Across the Divide, where you can get a bunch of minions back at once. Which ones are the ones you want to use? Groupies, for example. Great, use it for the groupies because that's your plan. At the same time, you have to do the same for your opponent. What are you fearing from them? You have to ask, what does it take in order to get second, and can any specials disrupt what I need to do? If I'm going to win, am I sure that I'm going to win? What do I need to play around? And what do I need to do to make sure that I'm not leaving any points on the table? And most importantly, with every turn, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. Is it worth it? Is it worth blowing up a number of guys on Cave of Shinies to get 2 points, only to let them solo the base, and that would have been the 2 points you would have gotten at all? The 2 points you would have gotten in the first place. Maybe it would be better to blow up one guy, keep second, and get 3 total points from the base. That's a call that you need to make every turn, every game, but by following these steps, I think it'll shed a lot of light on how to be a better Smash Up player. Thanks so much for watching. Let's shut it down.